Sup, ladies and gentlemen, Akalon here, and welcome back to each and every one of you. Of course, if you are new to the channel, thank you so much for joining us. I am very happy to have you here. Of course, in today's video, we're continuing our search of Reddit. Every morning when I have my coffee, right? I read Reddit. I love Reddit. One of my favorite subreddits is Warcraft lore. And the reason I love it so much is very often people come up with questions. They come up with theories that spark more theories in my mind. And while I know that they don't make those theories for me specifically, I like using those theories to sort of spark something new. It's like the Discord. I love reading the lore channel on the Discord because it's the same thing. It just sparks theories in my mind. It brings those juices together, and it forms a beautiful symphony of fucked upness, of speculation and craziness. That's the best, really the best explanation I have for it, is it fucks up my mind with more and more speculation theories. I don't know if I'm right, I don't know if I'm wrong, I don't care. At the end of the day, it's about the fun that I have with these stories, and hopefully you have fun with these questions and these theories as well. Today's theory is actually quite cool, or at least there's a lot that this guy put into his post, and we're gonna go through all of that. Remember, you can follow me live on Twitch. Link is in the description down below, every Tuesday to Friday, or every Sunday right here on YouTube, where we go 4 to 6 hours balls to the wall, as much speculation and Warcraft lore as humanly possible. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's jump into it. So our post today comes from Jonathan RL. Now, I don't know where Jonathan Fantasy is, but this is Jonathan RL, and his post starts as follows. That was a bad joke. I don't know where I wanted to go with that, actually. Oh well. A comprehensive list of all of the afterlives we know about so far. Yeah, a comprehensive list is probably not possible, but I was going to give an attempt at the ones we have seen. All this, by the way, assumes that getting souls is a bit like first come, first serve. The Kyrians of Bastion do not necessarily get every soul. Some are resurrected by their friends and others grabbed by other parties beforehand. I guess from the assumption, Jonathan, I would say that that's already very wrong. Most of these souls, where they go, is absolutely down to the Arbiter, but I don't think that's the point you're trying to make, because you are talking about being resurrected. Now, on that point, I just have to point out that in the lore, resurrection is almost impossible. In the lore, resurrection would require an immense amount of power that would most likely require the help of one of the cosmological forces in order to do. It's been done very rarely, and when it's done, the one who does the resurrection is almost drained of all of their power, so they have to take a long time just to recover, right? So just right off the bat, the idea that we resurrect things and hey, look at that, the Kyrians lost another one, not entirely true, right? It's very rare in the lore that someone will get resurrected. It's more possible or more likely that someone will be raised as Scourge, and we already know, thanks to Ioannis Akostas, that necromancy takes the soul and sort of forces it to the body. So the soul and the body is no longer one, but the soul is sort of forced into the body. And then thanks to the Four Horsemen, we write forth short that we got just, I think 3 months ago, 2 months ago, something like that. We now also know that they lose a lot of their faculties, a lot of their ability to experience emotion and really be human is lost in this necromantic ritual that brings them back to life. So yeah, one can make the argument first come, first serve, although I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that specifically. All right, so let's get into what you talk about the different afterlives may be. Oblivion. You die and your soul and consciousness cease to exist. Essentially your true death, and what happens should you die in the Shadowlands. Most likely the fate of any souls completely drained of anima, since Ravendreath implies the anima keeps the soul functioning. The Scourge seems to have different machines to harvest the anima from souls, regarded by most as a horrible fate. Now, as for the Scourge being able to harvest this anima, I think it could have been done in sort of a limited fashion, but it would definitely not have been as effective as what Revendreth have come up with. Revendreth is legendary in the Shadowlands in most ways, based on the story at least as it's playing off right now. Most of the Covenants actually got most of their anima from Revendreth, because Revendreth is so efficient at harvesting anima from different souls, and this should show you the factory farming nature of the Shadowlands in its entirety. Now, I would actually change Oblivion with Void. In my newest speculation that I did yesterday, I made a video on what exactly the original intent of souls were, and in my opinion, Jonathan and everyone that's watching, I think the original intention was that souls would live, and that, you know, the light and life and those cosmological forces, they would have the ability to create life. But then once you died, you would move on to the void. If you think about the void, if you break it down, what it actually means, it just means nothingness, right? That's what void is. If something is void, there's a block, there's nothing inside this block, it's void of anything, right? Void of emotion. In other words, you have no emotion, much like the Scourge, for example. So I would argue that that was the original intent of the living. The living would always return to the void, and at some point, the light got it into their head that they could find far more power if they actually disrupted the system. You'd have to watch that video. I have a link for you in the description down below if you want to go watch that and see exactly what I'm talking about. But just on that point, I think Oblivion would be better described as void. Returning to the void, returning to the masters, returning to your origins, so to speak. The void also, and the creatures of the void, the creatures who serve the void, they constantly talk about this, right? Embrace death. You cling to your life as if it actually matters. So they constantly have these ideas about death and giving in and just relinquishing control of life, because life in their mind is an enemy. It's not actually a good thing. And Sylvanas has something very similar that she says to Anduin. The more I read about this, the more I learn about the more I read the Whispers, and the more I see the Whispers as actually a conversation not meant for us, the more I start to think there's a lot of crossover between Sylvanas, Zuvul, and the Void. Anyways, next up, Shadowlands. Any being not claimed by any other probably ends up here, meaning the majority. They are judged by the Arbiter and sent forth. Since most of the Shadowland realm seems to have a purpose, we can assume the Shadowlands are not the actual way death is meant to be. No, we don't even have to assume that, just by the way, since yes, you are correct. That is actually a wonderful way of looking at it. The idea that every single one of these zones serves a very specific purpose, and if you think about the overall purpose, it's to keep the jailer locked up. That's the original purpose of all of these zones. They strengthen themselves because they are the physical locks that keeps the jailer in check, that keeps him inside the maw, that keeps him banished, so to speak. We know this because it's said, if the jailer strikes down each one of the Covenants, he will finally be free, and they do seem to be very worried about the fact that their zones are suffering, therefore, you know, Zuvul is going to be free. Now they have secondary purposes, and so Ardenweald, for example, is meant to recycle life and push it back into the great beyond. Revendreth is meant to punish the sinners and sort of redeem them so that they don't have to go to the maw. Maldraxxus' secondary role, in my opinion, is to defend the Shadowlands, but that's part of their primary role, because if the Shadowlands falls, Zuvul is free and the universe falls, right? So in my opinion, all of these zones, the Kyrians, same thing. Their main purpose is to keep the jailer starved. It's actually to ensure that the souls don't go to the jailer. And if you look at the natural flow of souls, they flow straight into the maw once you remove the Arbiter. So the natural flow of souls, seemingly, is into the maw. That's where all of the souls went from day one, and Oribos and the Arbiter really is the dam that changed the direction of the flow of souls. So just on that, wanted to point that out. But the Shadowlands found a way to make use of the dead of many worlds to further their purpose. The Maw did not break death, as it were. Well, I don't think anyone ever argued that the Maw broke death. The Shadowlands did. That's an interesting thought, right? The Shadowlands have always been flawed. I think that's very clear. I think anyone that looks at the Shadowlands and how it's set up will know that it's always been flawed. There seems to be a massive issue within the Shadowlands and how it operates, how it functions, because its very nature, the very reason for its downfall is the way that it functioned. That's why it is now suffering the way that it is. So that's a rather interesting concept that you bring up there. Alright, so the latter is just a pet theory of mine, and I find it hard to argue against it. It should also be mentioned that it seems no soul, so just on that, it is hard to I don't think anyone, and I would love to hear it, if you have an argument against the idea that the Shadowlands itself is really the reason it broke, because the Shadowlands itself is a abomination of what it was meant to be when you die. I would love to hear it. If you actually have a theory against it, fuck, I'm all ears, because I don't actually have anything against that. I don't know how to argue against it, because everywhere I look in the Shadowlands, it all just seems a little bit wrong, right? It all just seems a little bit wrong. The more than a break you find hard. It should also be mentioned that it seems no souls ever go directly to the maw. Well, how it used to be. You're right. The Arbiter, it doesn't appear as if the Arbiter ever sent any souls straight to the maw. They would almost always go to Revendreth. This is most likely why Uther and Devos intercepted Arthas, to ensure that he would go to the maw. Because Devos most likely knew that Arthas wasn't going to end up in the maw, he was going to end up in Revendreth, or maybe in Maldraxxus even. The Arbiter would never send him to the maw. And it makes sense, right? They're trying to starve the jailer. They don't want him to have anima, because the anima that he gets will just make him more powerful. And so they're continuously trying to starve him of that. So it doesn't make sense to send even one soul through to the jailer. So yeah, I would argue you're very much on point with that. You do not wish to supply the anima with the jailer. The Light. The Naru had a quest in Northrend where they saved a young crusader from undeath. Not just that, Una in Legion is another example of her parents being saved by the Light and taken to the Light. So you don't even have to go that far back to Northrend. You can just look at Legion and you get very much the same thing. However, it feels strange that they would send such a champion of their cause to the Shadowlands. So basically, on this point, I would say Steve Denuser had an interview where he discussed this. Every soul or every being that belongs to a specific cosmological force, upon their death will return to their source. So beings of the light will go to the light. Beings of the void will go to the void. Beings of the twisting nether will go to the twisting nether. This is how it is meant to be. Now, we've argued about this multiple times in the live streams, multiple times on the channel, in the Discord. The very idea of what exactly constitutes a servant. Someone like Turalian, for example, that you mentioned in your article as well. Would Turalian be viewed as a servant of the light, to the point where upon his death, he would go to the light? The light would take him to their cosmological force. Could that be something that happens? I argue yes, most likely. That is exactly what would happen. The same with someone like Xavius, for example. Xavius was a normal creature of the Great Beyond. Not entirely normal, but he was a normal creature of the Great Beyond, right? And so his service to Sargeras turned him into a demon. So he's a demon now, but he wasn't always a demon. In other words, his service, the service that he provided to the Twisting Nether actually ultimately corrupted him and turned him into a demon. So upon his death, would he return to the Twisting Nether or would he go into the Shadowlands? What comes first? It's the whole chicken and egg argument, ultimately. That I'm not entirely sure what the answer is to that argument. I personally believe that the Shadowlands itself is an abomination of the system. And that the original system would either have been all souls go to the maw or to the void, where they become nothingness, because the void is ultimately the return to nothingness, right? From something to nothing, that would be from something to void, from life to death. That is my original my original idea. But then one could argue, well, what if the Shadowlands is another perversion of an even larger perversion? So all of these other cosmological forces started stepping in, and they sort of started taking souls for themselves. So not even their souls is returning to the void. So the void really is the only one being starved, and it would make sense because the void might become too powerful if you feed it too often. So this might be part of an even larger conspiracy theory and an even larger perversion of the system, so to speak. So just on that. And then of course you bring up the other side. The other side, of course, Bwonsamdi's realm, or the realm of the lower, even though Bwonsamdi himself does claim that this is his realm and he sort of built it, it does appear as if some of the other lower would have access to the other side. Now, you make your argument in your post that Bwonsamdi seems to be a servant of the Shadowlands. I actually don't think so. This is just, by the way, speculation. I could be 200% wrong on this, but in my opinion, the lower might have been before the Shadowlands almost. The lower may have been creatures that have been co-opted by the Shadowlands or replaced by the Shadowlands even. If you look at Muazala is extremely old. Bwonsamdi claims that he predates the earliest race on Azeroth, the Trolls, by some amount of time. And we know that Muazala is the one that made him a lower. And so Muazala would predate him by even more years. So therefore, the Loa really is an extremely old force, but it does also appear as if the Loa doesn't like the Shadowlands. The fact that Muazala, the boss of the Loa, decided to turn against the Winter Queen should tell us that maybe there was never a relationship to begin with. Perhaps the Loa themselves were replaced by the Eternal Ones of the Shadowlands, which I believe is the Eternal Ones of Order. I think they're Titans, the same as the Titans of the Pantheon, because they seem to have a similar one-track minded nature. They seem to be similar in that sense, right? So I think they replaced the Loa, and they sort of again perverted the work that the Loa, the mission that the Loa had, was sort of taken over by the Shadowlands, and all because of this incessant need for anima. The power that our souls hold is clearly very important and very valuable. So valuable that it stands to reason that you could fuck over the entire universe to ensure that you get your hands on it. My theory is that this was done by the Light and by Order, by their Titans, the Titan creations. And again, you'd have to watch my video where I discuss how I think the Light is actually in control of Order and of life, how all of this is actually just an extension of the Light, and that the Light and the Void may have been first, but you have to watch that video to really make sense of it. I should have a link of it in the description down below. If I don't, just tell me in the comment section, bro, where's the fucking link? And I'll give you that link. But most importantly, I want to hear from you. What do you make of this article? What do you make of my defense and sort of my critiques of the article? Is there things that you actually think you can critique me on that I may have gotten wrong? Of course, I'm just human. I legit don't pretend to be right. I just enjoy the story, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe you have evidence that I'm wrong. So share it with me in the comment section down below. Remember, if you like this video, to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and smash that bell if you want to see more of my content. Of course, if you hate those pesky notifications, don't smash the bell. It will just drive you crazy, and then you'll stop watching my videos, and that would be very, very sad. Of course, all of the patrons, the Twitch subs, and the YouTube channel members, thank you so much for your monthly contributions. It does mean the world to me. Thanks to you guys, this channel is still growing, and it's growing stronger every single day. I quite literally wouldn't be here without you, so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Guys, always, my name is Aquilon, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out, fam.